Welcome to Fridays with a Forester. This is April 25th, 2025. Forestry for Minnesota birds is our topic today. My name is Gary Wyatt, host with Lauren Beckus. I'm out of the Mankato Regional Office, part of our forestry team. Lauren is out of the Andover office, our regional support staff up there. And thank you, Lauren, for joining us today. Our today's topic and speaker, Forestry for Minnesota birds. Jamie Strange, a Northern Forest Conservation Delivery Network Coordinator, Upper Mississippi Great Lakes Joint Venture American Bird Conservancy. And there's her email if you want to email her, and I'll have this up again later in the presentation as we close today's webinar. But she's going to be talking about that Forestry for Minnesota Birds publication that's just coming out. So some Zoom details. If you have questions, please ask the question in the Q&A, please. And then we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. All of our webinars for Fridays with the Forester are recorded on a Z-link, z.umn.edu/Fridays. So you can actually find the last 2 or 3 years of Fridays with the Forester. They've been very popular, and we've decided to keep going with them after COVID, and they've been very successful. Jamie, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll let you start, and you can begin. Let's let you get full screen.
All right, can you see my title
Yes.
slide? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Gary, for inviting me to share with Fridays with the Forester. Disclaimer, I am not a forester, but I am a lucky biologist that gets to partner with a lot of different foresters across the Northwoods of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And also, thank you, Gary, for my title. I do work for the Upper Mississippi Great Lakes Joint Venture, and I am an American Bird Conservancy partner within that joint venture. So thank you, everyone, for coming today and to listen to our brand new Forestry for Minnesota Birds guidebook and program. So I'm going to go over why we should care about birds and give an overview of the Forestry for Minnesota Birds guidebook that is in print right now. I'm going to give you a little details on the Minnesota habitats that we chose and the representative bird species. And then I'll talk a little bit on how to use a Forestry for Minnesota Birds guidebook. So why should we care about birds? Well, I care about them because they're fascinating and beautiful and all over. But one thing to think about is that according to a study published by Rosenberg et al. In 2019, is that there are documented continental and local declines in numerous bird populations. And this has led to concern for future and migratory resident land birds. Here I've shown just some graphics on the decrease of boreal forest birds has been 33%, and the eastern deciduous birds is 17%. The reasons for declines are complex. Examples of human disturbance are conversion to farmland, loss of wetlands, forest simplification, and an increased dominance in fewer tree species. There is also habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation on our wintering grounds for migratory birds. There are threats along those migratory routes. For example, window collisions. Many species are more vulnerable to window collisions. Because of these threats, many times we at American Bird Conservancy are partnering on a full life cycle, a partnership with looking at the hemisphere and to find conservation solutions for birds and their habitats. So why should we care about these declines? Birds are excellent indicators of ecosystem condition. They are responsive to environmental change and have important ecological function, like, for example, pollination, distribution, and pest control. Monitoring birds can provide scientists with information on the overall conditions of a forest or a grassland. So are Minnesota forests healthy? Are they biodiverse enough? Well, we can study these forest birds and they will help us find these answers on how our forests are looking in the state of Minnesota. And understanding the health of a forest can really give us information on the soil health or water quality and other wildlife benefits that we all enjoy. Lastly, birds have a significant cultural and economic importance with our communities. Surprisingly, birding brings a lot of tourists to many regions. Birds connect people to the landscape that they live in. And if you think back, many of us can remember the first bird that we ever observed. So take time to kind of reflect on this morning on what was the first bird that you remember seeing, and consider like how you felt when you were there and what were you surrounded by. Many people feel really connected to their woodlands when they know the bird species that are there because they're your neighbors. The map here is showing a time lapse of golden wing warbler migrating from Central America to northern Minnesota and Wisconsin. Golden wing warbler is a beautiful representative species for the state of Minnesota because about 60% of its breeding population resides there during the summer. They also respond to sustainable forest management, which I'll kind of go into depth soon. But why is Minnesota important? Well, in 2014, Scott Getz et al. Published a study analyzing the relative importance of climate and vegetation properties on patterns of North American breeding birds. Essentially, this map on the left here is showing species richness. The red is 31 to 41 different forest species. The species richness of northern Minnesota is very localized and a very important ecosystem for forest birds. It's important because we can study it, we can restore it, and preserve it for future generations. Minnesota is also on the right. You can see this map is showing the different habitats, the ecoregions of the state of Minnesota. It's located on a mid-continent transition zone from forested landscape along the Great Lakes system to a tallgrass prairie and prairie parklands, making it a very diverse state for habitat. So all of you who are in Minnesota should feel very lucky. It is my home state, so I love talking about the state of Minnesota. So, Forestry for the Birds. This is an innovative program which started through Audubon, Vermont. In 2018, the Forest Stewards Guild hosted a webinar featuring this program, and many interested parties started brewing in the state of Minnesota. In the Lake states, we have programs in the state of Michigan and Wisconsin who are in very different stages. But for the Minnesota program, we started in 2018. The Guild, American Bird Conservancy, and the Natural Resources Research Institute at the University of Minnesota, Duluth, partnered together to seek funding to get an initiative going in the state. And through 2019 to 2021, the team worked on getting people part of a core working group and then also meeting to talk about how this could look for the state of Minnesota. During the pandemic, Peter Deezer from American Bird Conservancy and Peg Robertson from the U.S. Forest Service, who's now retired, but she's still very active, they got the virtual working group together to talk about forestry for the birds and continued to seek funds. And by 2022, the Upper Mississippi Great Lakes Joint Venture was able to fund this initiative through the Great Lake Restoration Initiative funding. They were able to hire Christian Nelson, who is the coordinator of this program. And through 2023 and 2025, we have been working as a core working group to get this guidebook together for you, and it is now printing. So what does our core working group look like? We have a whole breadth of nonprofit, federal, state, tribal, and industry partners that are part of this program. Christian Nelson and Michael Lynch from the Forest Steward Guild have been really the parents of this program and have been stewarding it through the last few years. Christian Nelson is the coordinator, and he is the one has been getting this group together and getting everybody's opinions and making it a safe space for us to actually like have discussions and maybe even some arguments about what this habitats and birds can be for the state. Alexis Grindy, Josh Bednar, Steve Colby, and Anta Balami from the Natural Resources Research Institute in Duluth were huge players in bringing the bird science and habitats to the document. So these are our key authors on the book, but everyone else here listed here is still part of this core working group. And it's not just a guidebook, it is an initiative. So these are our experts in the state that can help assist any kind of private or public landowner to do sustainable forestry for birds. So here's Christian Nelson, who we hired through a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Christian is got a wealth of knowledge. I think he's got over 20 years of experience with forestry. Our mission as a core group is promoting forestry practices to benefit native birds across Minnesota's forest landscape by designing and sharing a conservation toolkit for landowners and natural resource professionals. So one thing you might see here, if you're familiar with the Michigan Guidebook, which was one of our foundations, they have two guidebooks, but our team chose to put all this information into one guidebook. The ultimate objective was to provide options for landowners that align with their goals of their property. We also want to make sure that we keep our forests healthy and promote resilience. Think back to that species richness map I shared. The northern state of Minnesota is one of the most species rich of birds in our country, in the contiguous US. We also want to adapt on climate change. We want to have resilient forests that can make it through the really fast changes we are seeing across the landscape. And we also want to plan for those future generations to come. So here it is. Here's the front cover. I'm just so excited to share this with you. Pileated woodpecker was chosen just because it's a common species in the state of Minnesota, but it's also just fun to see how it's taking care of its little babies. And it's just a great example of how stewarding our forests can really, really benefit our future generations. I will also now talk about how our core group broke into habitat specialists and bird specialists to help get all of the information into the book and decide how we would present this to the audience. So first, our Minnesota forest habitat types that we chose are broken down into four associations: upland conifer, upland deciduous, and mixed conifer, lowland conifer, and lowland hardwoods. We also had broken down into forest habitat subtypes because these will define the different forest management techniques that you can do. And then we went a little more in depth for those natural resource managers. We have the native plant community forest system, which is directly related to the Minnesota native plant communities. So a natural resource manager could really go into depth on the soil type and all the different foliage and species that they can bring it to their management techniques. So I'll first go over upland conifer. Minnesota's coniferous forest exists primarily in the north central, east central, and northeast portion of the state. They have shallow, nutrient-poor soils over bedrock or well-drained, sandy, gravelly soils. One thing to think about here too is that fire has helped shape this landscape, and many of these species within the upland conifer forests are evolved alongside fire. The species chosen for this, the bird species chosen for this, were kind of going across the different forest structures. So we have a mix of mature conifer with mix, which is the Blackburnian warbler. Hopefully you can see my mouse. The top bird here is a Blackburnian. Dense cover and mid-age conifers support magnolia warblers, which is here, and it's also the bird that's on my shoulder. And then the third bird that we chose is a dense conifer, but having a low shrub cover, which is our pine warbler. So these birds are all kind of giving us an idea of the different forest structure that we can add to our add to the upland conifer sites, but also tweak our management skills. And if we see these birds, we are doing the right thing. The trend for this habitat in the state is that drought and changes to water table are predicted to increase stress to these habitats. It would not be a Minnesota guidebook without lowland conifer. This habitat type makes up 20%, 21% of Minnesota forest lands, bogs and swamps. Think of like massive tamarack swamps that exist within the northern part of the state. I think north of Red Lake there's just a massive amount of lowland conifer. Lowland conifer sites primarily contain black spruce, northern white cedar, and tamarack. They have low, wet peatlands with saturated soils. So a lot of times these roots are not as deep, and there's a lot of sphagnum moss that's floating on the top. Mature lowland conifer forests with park-like understory support Connecticut warblers. So this example here is kind of is more of a Connecticut warbler habitat. And one thing I can point out here is that Connecticut warbler is a species of steep decline, and it is on the southern fringe of its habitat when breeding in the state of Minnesota. We actually have not seen any breeding pairs in the state of Wisconsin or Michigan in the last few years. So this is a red flag bird that we just are keeping on our radar. Golden crown kinglet is they prefer large trees in dense conifer forests with lowland pieces, but they're a little more common. So this habitat we chose a species of greatest conservation need and a common bird, just to kind of give us that well-rounded look at this habitat. A couple other birds that Swainson's thrush, spruce grouse, great gray owls are also present in here. And then if you really care about some of those snowshoe hares, they also like this habitat. One thing for trends on this is tamarack has been affected by native eastern larch beetle. This habitat is very susceptible to warming climate and variable precipitation events. With our warming winters, is causing a lot of stress to some of these habitats. The third habitat is upland deciduous and mix. This one is broken down into three subtypes. So like I said earlier, those subtypes are really helping define our forest management techniques. So we have aspen, birch, oak, and northern hardwood. There's quite a few birds also for this because there's multiple forest structures that we can use in different techniques and management that affects the bird species. There's a large range of different successional stages and a varieties of structures. Young aspen forests provide dense escape and brood rearing cover for a suite of species that include ruffed grouse, which is down here on the ground, um, American woodcock and golden wing warbler. We've got not listed in our species for the book. We can also think of mourning warbler and chestnut-sided warbler. So it may not look pretty, but it is a really, really great habitat for a lot of birds in those really dense aspen forests. These habitats in particular for upland deciduous and mix are vulnerable to pests, disease, drought, and even extreme wildfires. So, like I said earlier, in upland conifer, much of our forests are evolved to for fire, but because there is stronger wildfires happening, they aren't as adapted to those. So we really would prefer more low intensity but frequent fires to help steward the health of these ecosystems. But because we're having more high intensity, that is a threat here to some of these. We also have a lot of woodpeckers and red-headed woodpecker, yellow-bellied sapsucker, and the pileated woodpecker, which is on the cover, because they are our coarse woody debris and snag birds, and they're really showing us how beneficial it is to have dead trees in your forest. The last one is lowland hardwood. This is a one of my favorite habitat types because I just have spent so much time in lowland hardwoods. This is also broken down into two subcategories of black ash and bottomlands. The habitat structure of lowland hardwoods is driven by wind throw and fire disturbance. There's also changes to the surface water and flooding. So water is a huge player here in lowland hardwoods, which it is in all lowland habitats. These habitats are under pressure from a variety of different threats. The mature trees are dying due to extended flooding. And so let's think about we are seeing some extreme sways in our climate. So when there's a lot of flooding and then the next summer there's drought, this is really stressing out those mature trees and they're dying. I live along the Mississippi River and there's just a massive amount of dead standing wood, which is good. We have seen some increases in some bird populations because of that, but it also is affecting the river and the way that water and flooding, because it just drives more flooding. These habitats also have stress from emerald ash borer. It's threatening the black and green ashes in our state. The state of Minnesota, 8% of the trees are black ash. And because emerald ash borer is coming through, we're trying to just think of ways to try to mitigate the loss of those black ash. Because if there's a large stand of black ash dying, the water table will rise because of just how many will die and not be draining those lowlands. There's also openings in the canopy with these areas. If there's large openings, species such as red and silver maple will increase, and they're predicted to increase because of these canopy gaps. So just seeing like some trees are increasing, some trees are decreasing, but being able to like think of your goals and management just put that all into perspective. And the birds we chose here are prothonotary warbler, yellow-billed cuckoo, cerulean warbler, and a winter wren. So overall, we have 18 forest bird species that we're using to talk about forest management. So what does this look like in the guidebook? Sorry, I just had to check the time. This is our upland conifer birds, so Blackburnian, magnolia, and pine warblers. These are our species accounts that the NRRI has put together. They spent a lot of time talking about, which birds are stable, which birds are increasing, and they had to break down from 150 Minnesota forest birds. So this was difficult, but we were able to talk about wide geographic distribution. So we wanted birds that had uh, geographic distribution across the state. So like if there wasn't any Blackburnian warbler, is there magnolia warbler? Kind of thinking about that. And then are these birds habitat specialists? Do they just like to be an upland conifer, or are they flying around to different habitats during the breeding and wintering season? We also looked at a mix of relatively common birds, like I said earlier, and then other birds that are species of greatest conservation need, like the golden-winged warbler, Connecticut warbler, and a few others. Or I think red-headed woodpecker is also a species of greatest conservation need. And then a big key factor here, which NRRI went into depth on, is are these birds responding to silvicultural management? And are their birds easy to ID as social species? Not everybody knows what all these birds are. So let's find a couple birds that are representing a cohort of birds in that habitat. So a landowner who doesn't know much about birds can go out and say, hey, there's a red-headed woodpecker and I have enough woody debris on my property. So if you look at these species accounts, each bird has a background. They have a population status. So are they declining range wide? Are they stable in the state of Minnesota? Partners in Flight is a program where of bird monitoring in the contiguous US that are they under concern, moderate concern, low concern? Are they a species of greatest conservation need for the state of Minnesota? All of these are no, but we have to look at some are increasing and some are stable, and this can tell us a little bit about what the habitat looks like in that state. So another part about working with our graphic designer is we put together a key to showcase the bird eye view of a forest. This key has forest structure. So we talk about overstory. Where does this bird like to thrive? Where are they fledging? Where are they foraging? In the overstory, in the midstory, or in the understory? Do they like ephemeral ponds or any sort of water component? Do they prefer conifers or hardwoods, snakes, shrubs? This graphic is just a really fun way to show like where this bird could be seen if you were to go out into your habitat in your woods. So let's kind of talk a little bit about how to use this guidebook. I know I gave you like a really quick preview of like what are the habitats and which 18 birds did we choose, but the ultimate goal is that we would want people to use this as a conversation to managing your forest habitat in different ways to create overall forest health and increase bird populations and wildlife. So the ultimate way to start is what are your goals as a landowner? The second part is to assess your current land or stand that you are talking about managing. And we do have a forest habitat assessment sheet that I'll go over here in a second. And then what are your desired goals from that? So sometimes doing an assessment right away can help you give an idea of what do I desire on this property and how is it going to support my goals? Then we want to work with a forester or a natural resource manager to create or modify our forest management plan, and then integrate it. Actually, do this and put it on the ground. And then what's really fun about working with American Bird Conservancy is talking about assessing our outcomes. And in many times, like with our NRCS RCPP program, with golden winged warbler, putting young successional on the landscape, we can put acoustic recording units called ARUs on the property to study which birds are showing up after we do a forest management treatment. We also have some science going on in Michigan where we're going to study different silvicultural treatments and how the birds are responding to that. So, and we may not be assessing birds on our property, but you can assess like, is there going to be more woody debris? And I can physically see that, then you can know that it's providing a habitat for many birds and critters. And no matter what your landowner goals are, you can certainly make habitat tweaks to benefit birds and wildlife. This is an example of Camp Ripley and its surrounding landscape. It's part of what's called a Sentinel landscape. So it's a private DoD site that does silvicultural treatments that benefit birds alongside active military pesting, which is very unique landscape and just an unconventional way to manage a property, but also benefiting the soil and water health to make sure that this landscape stays healthy for the wildlife there. I think they said that they had like 60 sows, like 60 bears that lived on this 3,000 acre property. Maybe it was not, maybe it's like 30,000 acres. I might be wrong on that. Sorry. But just the idea is that they work in a sentinel landscape, so their adjacent neighbors are also doing forest management health work that is similar to what's going on Camp Ripley's property. It's benefiting the wildlife, the birds, and the soil, and all the water quality. So you may ask, okay, how do I get started? I'm so excited about all these birds and habitat. I want to get started on my property or with a natural resource manager has some properties they want to look at. So we have a forest habitat assessment worksheet. Within the guidebook, our team has put together this worksheet and we kind of went back and forth on it. Christian Nelson did most of the legwork on all of this guidebook. So shout out again to Christian for all of his hard work put into this. He's done a lot of different field assessments. And so I think having his experience here was super beneficial. But it's a great way to get out with a natural resource manager and walk through with a landowner on how they could create or tweak a forest management plan or what they can do on their property. So today I kind of want to walk through this with you on an example that we've provided in the guidebook. The top part, and I think that Lauren or Gary will share the link with you so you can look at it online along with me. But hopefully, if you can't read this, I'm sorry. It's very small text, but I will try to talk through most of what I'm going to show up on here. But the top part of this guidebook or the assessment is the basic information. So what's the date? How big is your stand that you're looking at or your property? This one, in example, is an upland deciduous mixed with a northern hardwood as its subtype. And now remember, those subtypes are what help define our forest management techniques. There is a dominant species of sugar maple and basswood on this site. So it kind of looks like something like the picture I've shared here. So what are the age of those trees? How big are they looking? This one has are they really tall? Are they like have a large basal area? There's 70 feet is like the average that this individual has put down. The average diameter is about 12 inches, kind of similar to a couple of the big trees in the photo here. And then an average age of 85 years. And the native plant community is the Mesic hardwood, which is kind of giving you into that soil type. On the back of this worksheet, now remember it's just a front and a back, there is resources. So someone who is not so familiar with canopy cover can just look at the back to see what the canopy cover percentages or how it looks to their eye point of view can look to a forester. So the next section is to talk about those gap sizes. Are there small gaps, medium gaps, large gaps, and using the estimated percent canopy cover resource that's provided on the back. So the overstory is sugar maple basswood with high canopy cover. So more of kind of in these dark, there's not very many gaps here. Mid-story is sugar maple ironwood with a low canopy cover. Understory is sugar maple with low, and the ground layer is sedges, trillium, and jack in the pulpit, which is medium cover. So very big overstory. My initial thought when I was going through this was, and I'm not a forester, I will remind you all that, but I would think that we would want to put in some more canopy gaps to open it up a little bit, kind of give some more biodiversity and openings to that forest structure. The next section is talking about conifers. So I will also, there's a section in the guidebook that talks about the importance of conifers. Conifers are great habitat for birds and other wildlife because they're a cover for hiding or for warmth on cold days. On this site, There is so it says softwood inclusions, which is conifer, is absent. There's no conifers observed in this stand. And it could be because the canopy is so thick, or maybe we have a lot of deer that are eating all of the conifers on this site. Also on the back, into the next section, we can talk about leave trees. So leave trees are trees that would want to leave during a timber cut that are their preference for longevity of wind. So some trees, if you just leave like a standing I think like a paper birch, they're gonna just fall over. They have more susceptibility, excuse me, susceptibility to falling over during like a windstorm versus a oak or a sugar maple. So this site, since it's all sugar maple, has 100% great snag trees that will stand during a windstorm. There on this site, this individual has found two snags that are small, two snags that are large, and then 100% of those snags are probably sugar maple, but we would want to create more. These are really great wildlife trees, and snags are just standing dead wood. And the next part that kind of goes into downed wood on the ground. And so this is where the bugs and like rough grouse used for drumming and the squirrels like hide a bunch of nuts. Like downed wood is really great wildlife trees as well. Even though they're down, it's great habitat. So coarse woody debris, there's sparse amount on this site and or sparse large woody debris and abundant small woody debris, which is still good, but it sounds like this person wants to create more coarse woody debris. And the leaf litter depth, which is also great for ground nesting birds, such as ovenbird and a golden wing warbler. The leaf litter depth is good here, which we want to see. It's good to leave your leaves on the ground. Messy forestry is good forestry, and this is where the bugs thrive as well. If you leave the wood or the leaves down, you'll get a lot more bugs and a lot more birds are going to come in for the buffet. The back, so let's flip it over. So we've kind of got an idea of what the habitat looks like, what trees are there, how much coarse woody debris, how many conifers are on the site. Um, so the back goes a little bit more like, is there water present? Since it's upland deciduous, my guess is it's absent. Correct. So we don't have any water on the site, which is good because it's an upland site. Pretty typical. The second part is talking about invasive species. So you always want to tune into your invasive species because they could take over if you open up the canopy. There is buckthorn here on the northeast corner with seed-bearing trees and several dozen seedlings. So this is definitely something you're going to want to add to a management plan or just keep in mind on what you want to take off the landscape. You're going to want to try to manage for that buckthorn. The second section or the third section on this is talking about the birds and wildlife signs. So this individual went out and they heard you can just go out for 5 minutes on a site and listen to the birds what birds you see. There's black-capped chickadees, hairy woodpeckers, red-breasted nuthatch, blue jays, red-eyed vireo, and wood thrush. So that's really key on understanding like it's a closed canopy. You've got some woody debris, so the hairy woodpeckers coming in, then the nuthatch. Those birds really like that coarse woody debris or standing woody debris. And the red-eyed vireo and wood thrush like that closed canopy, like they're probably flying around in the mid-story there. So it's really cool to see what birds are there and how it's in telling you what the landscape looks like. And then the wildlife signs are gray squirrels, deer scat, and browsed seedlings, which, yes, that's probably why we don't have any conifers here, and then black bear scat. The last section is talking about the landscape level. So what does the landscape look like around your property? And is your property similar or different? One thing we always like to say is to provide a mosaic of habitat for birds because if you think about like how you live, like your kitchen is not where you sleep, right? Like they're going to go out and feed, but then they're going to come back to their nests and they might be different habitats. So having a mosaic provided for the birds will really benefit them and it benefits the health of the forest and soil and water. So let's go back. So we finished our assessment. Now let's think about what were our landowner goals for this site? what are the desired future outcomes? Like, do we want to do timber cut? Do we want to support wildlife? Do we want to open up for agriculture? Like, it really depends on what your goals are. And overall, for wildlife in general, we would want to encourage larger, coarse, woody debris on this site because they're great wildlife trees. And then to do that, you could girdle some of those larger trees because we don't have, it's a lot of small right now. So maybe go out and girdle a couple of those big ones and they will eventually die. And and you can pick a safe one, but working with a forester as well to decide which trees you do. I would also think that if you want more conifers, you could plant some conifers in the site. Maybe recommend putting some deer fencing and deer protection because there is such large browse, or getting some hunters out to get some venison just to help control those populations. And then I would definitely recommend buckthorn control added to any sort of forest management plan before you do any work because they are going to take over if you take out any trees. So part of the guidebook, you've done your assessment. You can pull this guidebook out with your forester or with your landowner and turn to page 26 to get silvicultural systems that are recommended. And these are not just like this is all what you should do, right? This is a conversation. It's a way to talk about different management techniques or different ways that you can manage your property and support your goals. So, for example, in the upland deciduous, we have the two subtypes. This one is in the hardwood uh, subtype. So the recommendations here are crop trees as uncut trees that are left behind. They have ecological and economic value for sure. And they're also taking some smaller trees out, opening up the canopy to let the sun shine in a little bit. And then also the other one is you could open it up a little more with group selection and create more space for the crowns of those desired trees. And this can result in an increased diameter of those desirable trees. So you could do something, you could look at those silvicultural treatments, but there's also just on page 31 when you not scroll, when you roll through the book, you'll get to page 31 and you'll get to silvicultural tweaks for Minnesota birds. So this is more of like a general, like, what are all the things that I could do to my property that support the different habitats, forest habitats in the state. So for this example is upland deciduous, northern hardwood. We want to have natural disturbance return intervals. So fire was a good example back before European settlers, where it would just naturally occur over time and open up the landscape and thunderstorms, wind throw. We also want to scatter conifers throughout, and particularly in the guidebook, we have suggested to plant them on the southern portion of the stand to help with shading. So that it just prevents the hardwoods from cracking from frost and such in the wintertime. Then we have the silvicultural treatments that we've suggested and there's a multiple suggested throughout this book, but this is particularly for our example, is single tree or group selection to create that mosaic of canopy gaps and openings for the wildlife and the trees and whatnot. Also promoting or retaining tree species diversity. So changing up, maybe you want to plant a few different species on your property to create a diverse landscape. And you also want to maintain or create large patches of upland forest in this. So you want to just, if you have a large stand, keep it large. I wouldn't recommend cutting down like one section and then changing it up on the other side. It's just you want to look at the landscape and have, maintaining larger stands will create better habitat for wildlife. And then keeping those snags, cavity trees, and coarse woody debris. Those dead wood, it's great for carbon sequestration and for wildlife. And then finally, manage invasive plants and animals. This can be difficult, but in a battle, but it just keep at it and it will be rewarding if you are able to push back invasive species. But wait, there's more. So we had our two sections here in the guidebook, but we also have appendices. So we have our Appendice A is habitat feature descriptions. There are 10 ways to improve habitat for birds and wildlife. It's just a simple table that I'll show you on the next slide. It's kind of like our 10 things that you can do to support wildlife and birds. Appendix B goes in depth on the habitat types, identification, ecology, natural history. So this is where your natural resource manager or a forester is going to dive into, or if you're a landowner that's really interested in the science and ecology of your land, this is a great section to read through. And then the Appendix C, oh, also in Appendix B, we have climate change, vulnerability, and adaptability. So giving some suggestions and resources to how to make your forest more resilient. And then we also have the importance of conifer trees to wildlife in that section. And finally, the Appendix C is a glossary to help define all those technical terms that are listed throughout the guidebook. So here's just our example of key habitat structures and importance for Minnesota birds. So like I've said throughout today is having vertical structure, horizontal structure, just providing a mosaic of habitat through your forest. It's not really fun to have just one age of trees that are all the same size, kind of like a monoculture, just same species, same size, same height. The birds like to have that variety, and then having some canopy gaps so the birds can fly and catch bugs for those aerial insectivores. Uh, Looking at native biodiversity and invasive species, so removing those invasive species, supporting those large diameter trees. Conifer inclusions, those conifer trees are just great for wildlife. And having snags, cavity, down woody debris, leaf litter, and duff, those are going to bring in all your bugs for their food and their protein. And then having a riparian and wetland forest is really beneficial as well. Just water features are always supporting our our forest. This is an example of our climate adaptations. We've worked with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science with Stephen Handler, and he helped Christian. They had a discussion about like how to put this into the guidebook, and majority of it is a reference to this climate change field guide for northern Minnesota forests. So this is just a quick summary of the different tree species for each habitat and what is their adaptability to climate change, because some trees are more adaptable to a changing climate and changing water tables that we are seeing across the state. And finally, I will leave you with our fun little Where in the Woods that our graphic designer has put together. We did this in Michigan, and it's just a really great way to reflect on how the birds are really representing the different habitats in our Great Lakes states. Biodiversity loss is broadly acknowledged by all of our natural resource managers as a main cause of ecosystem change. Birds are perfect indicators for telling us what a habitat needs. So in our case today, we're talking about forests. Birds are excellent indicators for ecosystem health and especially forest health. From the bird's eye view, which this picture is showing, you can see where the birds are breeding, feeding, fledging, and recreating. It's like it's their home. So it's like you think of their bedroom, their living room, their dining room. This is providing all of those for the birds can really increase the health of your forest. And we are so lucky to have expert silviculturists and foresters and biologists in our state of Minnesota who have helped develop these science-backed forest management techniques that can help a working woodland stay healthy for future generations to come. So if there's anything that you take away today, it's that in my mind, if you don't have time to look at the guidebook, just think of messy forestry is good forestry, and providing a mosaic of habitats for the birds will create a healthy forest that we as humans can enjoy for generations to come for sure. So I will leave you here with the QR code to access the digital guidebook. I will also give you Christian Nelson's information since he is the coordinator of this program and has been leading our team for the last few years. And then my contact information is there as well. I'm more of working on the landscape with Wisconsin and Michigan, but my heart is in Minnesota as well. So I just really appreciate you all listening to me today and previewing our guidebook. We've put our blood, sweat, and tears in this guidebook, and we're so excited that it's finally live. We are printing it right now. It will be free. We are hoping to distribute to a lot of different locations, get it to Minnesota, University of Minnesota Extension and Sustainable Forest, Ecology Cooperative, SFEC. Hopefully I said that right. But yeah, we're just hoping to distribute it, and your local DNR offices will have them on hand where you can take one home or bring to your forester. So with that, Gary, I'm ready for questions. Thank
Excellent
you.
present. That's an excellent presentation, Jamie. Wonderful. Got a few questions here already. So does this book recommend which trees to plant with a warming climate for each forest type? And I did
Mhm.
actually put in the chat a reference to our website for our forestry team that has been working with a climate-ready woodlands recommendations for trees in different parts of the state. It matches the DNR's biomes of the different biomes of the state of Minnesota. So that may be a question that you want to comment to or not, but
Sure.
yeah.
Absolutely, Gary. I know Anna Stockstad has been talking about climate-ready woodlands in the state, and I think that resource is perfect. In the guidebooks, we the only part that we talk about specific species is in our climate adaptations page for resiliency, and it's directly linking to that climate change field guide that NIAX put together. And we would also highly suggest you talk to your foresters, talk to a local natural resource manager, because getting an expert opinion on your stand can really help decide which trees you can plant for that resiliency. There's a lot of different techniques. I think, for example, like the migration, assisted migration is one. And so you kind of want to look at the risk that you want to take on your site, and definitely working with a professional is the way to start. But we do have one page that with these recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you. Another person asked, who do I contact to create a plan for my 1.2 acres in Bloomington? I have
Oh.
survived the loss of 119 Dutch elms and am now losing ash. I have a
Hmm.
pond, a waterfall, and both conifer and hardwoods. So I'll let
Hmm.
you answer that.
Yeah. Which city was that in?
It was in Bloomington. And actually,
Bloomington.
they could contact the county extension office in
Yes.
Bloomington area. And then
Hmm.
certainly we've got master gardeners, we've got extension educators that can address your landscape. And then actually there's some DNR specialists that might be able to, DNR foresters that
Yep.
could and help you with that too.
Yeah, I would recommend starting with your county for sure because they know the landscape in the county a lot better than maybe like the DNR might not just have as much hands-on down in Bloomington. But yes, definitely contact your county extension or the master gardeners, especially on 1.2 acres. It's hard because you probably won't have like a forest management plan, but it would be beneficial to start planting some species to help replace the loss that you've had, which I'm very sorry to hear. It's so sad to see the trees leave, but we can do something about it. It's not just and it might stink for a little while, but that woody debris, if you leave some of that there, it'll be great for wildlife and birds.
Next question about Met Council. Thank you, Jamie.
Hmm.
Met Council, let's see, has in the Twin Cities and metro area have a lot of large areas of forest where caring citizens can go and support their efforts. Thanks for you're doing and it's an amazing job. But I think the question was, are you connecting with Met Council or have somebody connected with that group?
No, I have not. I will now. We can get you part of our working group.
Sure. Thank you. Some
Hmm.
very good recommendations or just thank yous for your presentation.
Oh.
Is there a guidebook for Wisconsin?
Not yet. So, good question. Our core working group is formed, and we actually have a meeting next week with everybody. University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point has been leading a silvicultural program that supports birds. They also have a wildlife certificate, and they have a Forestry for Birds program coming up in May for natural resource managers. But we are hoping to work together in our core group. We're in the baby stage right now and decide the habitats for Wisconsin and the birds that'll represent our state and our state. Sorry, I'm in Wisconsin, y'all, our state. I'm from Minnesota though. So I think hopefully within the next year or so we can start talking about getting a guidebook together for the state of Wisconsin.
Super. Here's a question on flowering forbs. How do flowering forbs fit into this book?
Ooh, good question. Because it's so heavy, we don't have any flowering forbs described throughout. We do talk a little bit about the understory and supporting that, but it's mostly focused towards the tree species and yeah, but good question.
Another comment, awesome presentation. Thank you, Jamie. I think the collective we are finally figuring out our amazing planet and the place we live in just in the neck of time. Too bad the first Europeans did not ask the natives. They came across, what do you know about this place? Just an interesting comment. Let's see. Would you repeat the list of locations where we can get a physical copy of the book?
Oh, yeah. We're gonna try to distribute it throughout the whole state. So Minnesota DNR offices should have them. UW, University of Minnesota Extension will get a handful. Up in like Cloquet area, we'll have a lot, but we're hopefully going to like spread it out. I have my contact information here, and Christian, please write our contact information down, and we will try to get you a book as they're printed. Um, but yeah, hopefully at Minnesota DNR, we Sugarloaf up in along the Arrowhead of Minnesota will have them there. Duluth, NRI in Duluth will have some as well. So I would recommend wherever you're located, contact your DNR for a guidebook or send me a note and I can try to get you one.
Here's another question about insects and trees. How can we
Mm.
support the insects that rely on ash trees? Do we know which trees could help them?
Oh, I don't know by ash trees because remember, I am not a forester, but I do know that supporting bugs is having like ephemeral ponds. I wouldn't say go out and dig a pond, but if you do have standing water on your property, just leave it as is. I know mosquitoes suck, but they are they are food, and there's also for trees in particular, just if you have standing snags and they're safe in a safe location, just leave them. Just leave the dead wood on the ground or standing because the bugs will come and then the bird will follow for their food. So,
Very good. Another comment on USDA agencies like NRCS Natural Resource Conservation Service or your local soil water conservation district might have some
mhm,
landowner funding opportunities for tree plantings and different things and forest restoration. So do contact
mhm,
your local county
mhm.
NRCS office or SWCD office there in your counties.
Yeah,
One sugge-
absolutely.
one suggestion on your presentation, please label bird photos. A great presentation.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that.
I think you did mention the birds that were in the photos though.
I did
Um,
my best. I know yeah, I will do that the next time. I'm sorry.
Very good. Observation, watching a Cooper's hawk tear apart a goldfinch while the webinar was playing in
Oh,
Stearns County. Very
wow. Hopefully
graphic.
that's not an omen.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you
That's
for
awesome
sharing.
though. I'd love to see that. I mean, as a bird lover, like that's just so cool to see. And I know it's hard, like a goldfinch is so beautiful, right? But
Right.
the Cooper's hawk is pretty cool and must be lucky today, having a look good day.
Thank you. Let's see, residential landscape designer. I love how I can better support our greater landscape of our country.
Hmm.
Very good.
Yes, I love it too.
And we're not, probably not going to get all the questions, but let's see, I might be missing this working while listening. Is there digital version of U of M extension of physical copies only? Not sure. Uh, Physical copies of the book, certainly, a digital version of the U of M. If you want this to play again, our recordings are recorded on our Fridays, University of Minnesota YouTube type of channel. It's on Z-Link, z.umn.edu/Fridays if you want to review the recording. I think we'll close there. I will start sharing my last comments on these slides.
Well, thank you everybody for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Jamie, it was a wonderful presentation. And we thank Jamie Strange for being today's presenter on the forestry for Minnesota birds. And do look up that booklet that's going to be available. Our recordings for all of our Fridays with the Forester are Z-Link, z.umn.edu/Fridays. And as you leave today's webinar, there's a list of our Fridays there that we did this year. Certainly want to comment on some Fridays that you want to have a Fridays with a Forester next year. Some speakers and some titles of topics. Certainly we want your information on that. Again, if you're not receiving our monthly newsletter from our forestry team, My Minnesota Woods, there's a Z link there to access that and get your name on the list. And then our recordings again of all of our Fridays with a Forester are Z link, z.umn.edu/Fridays. This is our last presentation for the 2025 season. And thank you for joining us today. Thanks, Jamie and Lauren, for managing the web. Jamie, what a wonderful presentation. I look forward to getting that book myself. Thank you.
Thank you.